So this is Ray Bradbury's Timeless Stories for Today and Tomorrow. And what's awesome about the book is that it has stories by Roald Dahl, Ludwig Bemelmans, and E.B. White in it, as well as several other famous writers. But I just think it's really cool that it has three of the most prolific children's authors in it. And the book was published in 52, so a little bit before Roald Dahl hit his stride writing James and the Giant Peach, I believe, was his first big kids book. I can't remember if it was that or Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. But I'm going to read you a Roald Dahl story from the book today because it relates to what we were talking about in the BFG the last time that I recorded. The name of the story is The Sound Machine. And I'm just going to find it really quick in here. This book also has Shirley Jackson, John Steinbeck. The Sound Machine, page 140. Please excuse the pause. All right, I'm going to reorient my phone. Excuse me. And we will begin The Sound Machine by Roald Dahl. It was a hot summer evening, and Klausner walked quickly through the front gate and around the side of the house and into the garden at the back. He went down the garden until he came to a wooden shed and unlocked the door, went inside, and closed the door behind him. The interior of the shed was an unpainted room. Against one wall on the left there was a long wooden workbench, and on it, among a littering of wires and batteries and small sharp tools, there stood a black box about 3 feet long, the shape of a child's coffin. Klausner moved across the room to the box. The top of the box was open, and he bent down and began to poke and peer inside it. Among a mass of different-colored wires and silver tubes, he picked up a piece of paper that lay beside the box, studied it carefully, put it down, peered inside the box, and started running his fingers along the wires, tugging gently at them to test the connections, glancing back at the paper, then into the box. Then at the paper again, checking each wire. He did this for perhaps an hour. Then he put a hand around the front of the box, where there were 3 dials, and began to twiddle them, watching at the same time the movement of the mechanism inside the box. All the while he kept speaking softly to himself, nodding his head, smiling sometimes, his hands always moving, his fingers moving swiftly, deftly inside the box, his mouth twisting into curious shapes. When a thing was delicate or difficult to do, speaking to himself, saying, "Yes, yes, and now this one. Yes, yes, but is this right? Is it? Where's my diagram? Ah, yes, of course. Yes, yes, that's right. And now good. Yes, 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 yes." His concentration was intense. His movements were quick. There was an air of urgency about the way he worked, of breathlessness, of strong, suppressed excitement. Suddenly he heard footsteps on the gravel path outside, and he straightened and turned swiftly. A tall man came in. It was Scott. It was only Scott, the doctor. "Well, well, well," the doctor said. "So this is where you hide yourself in the evenings." "Hello, Scott," Klausner said. "I happened to be passing," the doctor told him, "so I dropped in to see how you were. There was no one in the house, so I came down here. How's that throat of yours been behaving?" "It's all right. It's fine." "Now I'm here, I might as well have a look at it." But please don't trouble. I'm quite cured. I'm fine." The doctor began to feel the tension in the room. He looked at the black box on the bench, then he looked at the man. "You've got your hat on," he said. Oh, have I?" Klausner reached up, removed the hat, and put it back on the bench. The doctor came up closer and bent down to look into the box. "What's this?" he said. "Making a radio?" No, just fooling around." It's got rather complicated-looking innards." "Yes." Klausner seemed tense and distracted. "What is it?" the doctor asked. It's rather a frightening-looking thing, isn't it? It's just an idea. Yes? It has to do with sound, that's all. Good heavens, man. Don't you get enough of that sort of thing all day in your work? I like sound. Well, it seems, the doctor went to the door, turned and said, well, I won't disturb you. Glad your throat's not worrying you any more. But he kept standing there, looking at the box, intrigued by the remarkable complexity of its insides, curious to know what this strange patient of his was up to. What's it really for? He asked. You've made me inquisitive. Klausner looked down at the box, and then at the doctor, and he reached up and began gently to scratch the lobe of his right ear. There was a pause. The doctor stood by the door, waiting, smiling. All right. I'll tell you if you're interested. There was another pause, and the doctor could see that Klausner was having trouble about how to begin. He was shifting from one foot to the other, tugging at the lobe of his ear, looking at his feet, and then at last, slowly, he said, well, it's like this. The theory is very simple, really. The human ear, you know that it can't hear everything. There are sounds that are so low-pitched or so high-pitched that it can't hear them. Yes, the doctor said, yes. Well, speaking very roughly, any note so high that it has more than 15,000 vibrations a second, we can't hear it. Dogs have better ears than us. You know, you can buy a whistle whose note is so high-pitched that you can't hear it at all, but a dog can hear it. Yes, I've seen one, the doctor said. Of course you have. And up the scale, higher than the note of that whistle, there is another note, a vibration, if you like. But I prefer to think of it as a note. You can't hear that one either. And above that one is another, and another, rising right up the scale for ever and ever and ever, an endless succession of notes, an infinity of notes. There is a note, if only our ears could hear it, so high that it vibrates 1,000,000 times a second, and another note 1,000,000 times as high as that, and on, higher and higher, as far as numbers go, which is infinity, eternity, beyond the stars. Klausner stood next to the workbench, fluttering his hands, becoming more and more animated every moment. He was a small, frail man, nervous and twitchy, with always moving hands, his large head inclined towards his left shoulder, as though his neck were not quite strong enough to support it rigidly. His face was smooth and pale, almost white, and the pale gray eyes that blinked and peered from behind a pair of thick-lensed steel spectacles were bewildered, unfocused, remote. He was a frail, nervous, twitchy little man, a moth of a man, dreamy and distracted, suddenly fluttering and animated. And now the doctor, looking at that strange pale face and those pale gray eyes, felt that somehow there was about this little person a quality of distance, of immense, immeasurable distance, as though the mind were far away from where the body was. Excuse me. The doctor waited for him to go on. Klausner sighed and clapped his hands together. I believe, he said, speaking more slowly now, that there is a whole world of sound about us, all the time, that we cannot hear. It is possible that up there in those high-pitched, inaudible regions there is a new, exciting music being made with subtle harmonies and fierce, grinding discords, a music so powerful that it would drive us mad if only our ears were tuned to hear the sound of it. There may be anything for all we know. There may... Yes, the doctor said, but it's not very probable. Why not? Why not? Klausner pointed to a fly sitting on a small roll of copper wire on the workbench. You see that fly? What sort of a noise is that fly making now? None that one can hear, but for all we know, that creature may be whistling like mad on a very high note, or barking, or croaking, or singing a song. It's got a mouth, hasn't it? It's got a throat. The doctor looked at the fly and he smiled. He was standing by the door with his hand on the doorknob. Well, he said, so you're going to check up on that? Some time ago, Klausner said, I made a simple instrument that proved to me the existence of many odd inaudible sounds. Often I have sat and watched the needle of my instrument recording the presence of sound vibrations in the air when I myself could hear nothing. And those are the sounds I want to listen to. I want to know where they come from and who or what is making them. And that machine on the table there, the doctor said, is going to allow you to hear those noises. It may. Who knows? So far I've had no luck, but I've made some changes in it, and tonight I'm ready for another trial. This machine, he said, touching it with his hands, is designed to pick up sound vibrations that are too high-pitched for reception by the human ear.